Husband to an amazing wife, father of three equally amazing daughters, and a grandfather to three incredible grandkids. Lynn Sensenig is a lifelong learner with passion for leading teams and watching highly motivated individuals thrive. With extensive leadership experience in corporate and family held businesses, Lynn has been the ultimate hired gun, as he says, navigating complex challenges with precision and purpose. From serving on boards and leading organizations, Lynn has worn more hats or wear more hats than a well-stocked hardware store, and with equal expertise. As the CEO of Houck since 2016, he has guided the company with steady expertise while also contributing to his talents to boards such as Paul B. Hardware, Clean Right Corp, Superior Walls of America, and also has done consulting for the North Group. He's a championship of people. Lynn's leadership journey is nothing short of a master class in strategy and servant-hearted success. Today, he's trading the boardroom for the microphone with us today. I'm Nicholas Paluco, CEO of One to One, a managed IT and IT security firm, and I'm the host of the Servant Leadership Library. So joining me today is Lynn. What a remarkable career. Wow, you're all over the place.
Well, first of all, whoever writes your copy, man, can I possibly hire them? Wow, that was quite generous.
We can make any kind of deal that you want.
It was quite generous, quite generous.
You've done a lot of great things. Tell us a little bit more about that. Tell us about your career. Kind of how you started, maybe how that intersects maybe with your education. A lot of the people that listen today. I had a conversation with a young lady yesterday that said, I just feel obligated to do what I went to school for. And I think a lot that listen wonder, like, wow, we're in these seats, but are we really doing what we went to school for? And I think it was really important to maybe hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, well, first of all, before I talk about any successes, let me talk about a bunch of failures.
Oh, all right, that's good.
So I would say, first of all, from an educational standpoint, I'm probably the least educated CEO out there. I dropped out of high school in 11th grade, took my GED as mandated by my father. About a year after that, I don't think at that point you could take your GED until your 12th grade class had graduated.
Wow.
But I did that, went to work for a local garage. I loved working on cars. I've always loved mechanical stuff in general, and so did that for a few years. And then went to work for a small company that was owned by a larger corporation in the early 90s.
Okay.
And that's probably where my corporate journey kind of started. So I would say this, Nick, I was, first of all, crazily blessed. So, God certainly had a big part to play in that whole thing. But I had some of the best bosses a guy could ever hope for. So I had wonderful folks that I reported to that taught me a ton. And I can't say enough. I would always say that every time they asked me to take on additional responsibilities, my response would be, if you're crazy enough to ask me, I'm crazy enough to say yes.
To take it.
Yeah. So I was really exceptionally blessed in that regard. And when I was in the 90s, starting kind of my corporate journey, had some amazing guys who were probably my seniors by 20 years or so,
Really?
but saw some promise in me. And said, one of my bosses, I love this line, because we were having a particular bad year at one of the companies I was running, and he said, Lynn, why do you think we give you the smallest company in the whole corporation? He said, because if you screw it up, it really doesn't matter. So,
so a good place to learn, I guess, right?
So it was a wonderful place to learn. I learned so much there, It got started when ITW, Illinois Toolworks, was doing a lot of acquisitions, and so got involved in some of that. The company that I ran was actually acquired by ITW, and learned they still do practice 80-20 or the Pareto principle religiously.
Really?
And so I learned a lot about that. We were all in manufacturing, so we all made in my group. We all made food service equipment.
Okay.
I made dishwashers. So for the most part, and garbage disposers, that kind of stuff. But it was all manufacturing. So, and I would say, spending 25 years in that world, I still believe that world's, I would say, generally a little bit more manageable and a little bit more predictable than construction.
Yeah.
Which is where I ended up now at Haux. So
that's a heck of a journey, though. Like, you talk about these leaders that saw something in you, and now you're one of those leaders. But I mean, what qualities do you feel that they, fostered in you or developed in you? As a leader now, what do you believe that they saw in you to give you such a great responsibility to run a division of a company?
Yeah, so I think they saw within me, they saw a desire to learn, and so I was the perennial optimist. Remember the Ronald Reagan story about the boy with the pony? Yeah. That's my nickname at corporate was the Pony Boy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was relevant around some beer bottles.
Well, that too. But so I was definitely an optimist, and I always had a chance to see opportunity and see areas that could be improved, and that was certainly a passion. So.
And from your growth of where you're at in the manufacturing, was it more in the operational side? Was it, tell us a little bit about that story, because I'm sure people are really curious that you went from your educational side of things and then you grew up into this company to run. I mean, there kind of is a window there. Like, what were the skills that you felt that you developed during that time?
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say I certainly started on the operational side. So I had a deep background in manufacturing, learned the shop floor. We did metal fabrication, forming, assembly, electrical work, all that kind of stuff. So had lots of technical experience.
Okay.
And I would say that I was probably maybe from that standpoint a subject matter expert on the technical side.
Okay.
But then to translate that into, hey, how do you take a business like this and grow it, was a completely different skill set.
Yeah, right.
So to learn strategy and understand where we could go for growth was really where I learned to love the acquisitive side of the business. So we always joke about that being kind of the crack needle of growth is acquisitions versus organic,
right.
And they're both great and they're both necessary. It was just that in my experience, it was generally a little easier to start with something versus build it from the ground up. But I will say this, I have huge amounts of respect for people who start from the ground up. Like, I don't think I'd had the patience for it.
No, it's a heck of a process.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, that's what you did.
I've done it a couple times, and there's a period of time that you get, I don't say a little bored, but you get a little impatient of like, I heard that from a meeting I was in the other day. Hey, be a little more patient. Yeah. And I'm like, that's not my personality.
Right.
I'll hire someone else to be patient.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about, you're a very humble man, and you've done such wonderful things, and you mentioned how blessed you are. Does the skills and abilities that are driving you come from instinctively growing up in your family? Did your father teach you those things? Many people say at the end of the day, it kind of came from their upbringing. Would you connect any of that to your experience?
No, that's first of all, I was privileged to have a wonderful upbringing. So grew up in a big family, 7 kids, and I would say that hard work was really valued. Faith was really valued. So all those things were great foundations for me. And I think my dad was always kind of a closet entrepreneur. Wanted to get there. His father started Spring Glen Farm Kitchen, so kind of grew up as a teenager watching that business, that family business grow.
Became a big organization.
It did, and then eventually sold to Hanover.
Yeah.
And
wow,
your father actually.
And my father worked at House. What a small world that is.
That's crazy.
Right?
That's crazy.
But now knowing you and knowing the culture there, it was very much about respect and a lot of strong core values there.
Yeah,
which was as a kid. They let me, which I think now today, right? I would call in the 800 number to ask for my dad. And because I just wanted to talk to my dad, right? And I'm thinking, man, what kid calls into the company and doesn't get yelled at for like, why are you calling your dad like every day at lunchtime? And I was in grade school or, different things. And the receptionist would answer the phone and she was so kind. She's like, I'll find your father for you. And there was never a day that she was like irritated at me. And I think now, like, wow, like what a culture that it was based around family. And my dad talked to me for a minute or two and then went on. But there was never an issue even hanging out there. Like I would go on Saturday with my dad to work.
Would you really? That's
and it
cool.
was neat. Like you get to meet the people, and we went on trips with his boss. I remember one we went through the Poconos and went whitewater rafting. It just the culture of like it just seemed so natural. Which was really neat, and what a credit to your family for that.
Yeah, no question. That would have been my grandfather, my uncles, and my dad worked there intermittently also. But it was very much a family business up until the mid-'90s when they sold. So probably would have been around the time your dad was ending up there.
Right,
up
just
there.
coming in there.
Yeah.
Just
coming in there.
Just coming in.
Yeah, okay.
And that's where he ended his career. Not ended. That's where he retired from.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he loved it there. It was just a neat organization.
Well, I mentioned that I had some great role models with obviously my mom and my dad. My grandfather also was a real role model. I always had such tremendous amounts of respect for how he interacted with people, how he cared for people deeply, but also really sharp. I wouldn't say shrewd, sharp businessman.
Yeah.
And well respected in the community. And it's funny because now so much time has passed, but when I was in my younger years, I could say I'm Titus Sensenig's grandson, and everybody would know.
They know.
Titus Sensenig. Yeah.
I mean, what a community that is. And now from going from a large family, I had a gentleman tell me the other day. I said, "Wow, you have 12 kids." He goes, "Do you know why I have 12 kids?" He goes, "So I don't have to do all the work." He goes, "So as you have more kids, they take care of each other." And I was like, wow, that's a good point. He goes, all of you that have 2 or 3 kids, he goes, that's a problem. You got to take care of all them. He goes, but when you have like 12 kids, they take, I was like, well, that's a different perspective.
Kinda makes sense,
but I guess it's he applied that to business.
Right.
He said, so the same principles that I use at home about delegation and teaching and educating is the same that we apply kind of in business. And how does that segue kind of from your, you run a quite a large organization today, right? Yeah. And from what I understand is you came in there kind of in a consulting role. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So I was actually working for North Group at the time. I had spent about 25 years in corporate life and was traveling constantly and started chatting with the North Group about what it would look like for them to find me something locally. And then they ended up asking me if I would come and work there. And I immediately was placed up at Hauk because North Group would do a fair amount of transitional leadership.
Okay.
So I was 3 days a week up at Hauk and had been there a few months. I will say this, and the North Group's incredibly charitable, but if they were totally brutally honest, they'd probably say I wasn't a great consultant. So,
Why is that?
I think it was me. It was definitely me. I think that I always saw myself being every business I got into, I was like, man, I feel like I could do some good here. Like I should probably be a little bit more involved, and didn't really care so much. I probably thoroughly enjoyed transitional leadership.
Okay.
I just didn't enjoy necessarily the consultant side, where you were more of a kind of a persuader. And not to say that I'm a mandator, I'm not, but I just like being in the business and watching. I always had an affinity for the big numbers and watching the needle move, and I love watching the needle move.
See like the measurement of the success by the number.
Right. And coupling that with I'm privileged to work for the Hauk family, who is very people focused. So we always try to keep that at the front and center. But at the same token, if you're not running a profitable business, you're not going to be around.
You're not going to stay around.
Exactly.
Long. Yeah.
Exactly.
We say we end up being nonprofits.
There you go. It's exactly
There's
right.
a lot of profitable nonprofits, I guess, too. Well, it's let's talk about like servant leadership in your mind. Like you seem to be someone that when you answer those questions, you seem very much about serving others. Talk about your definition of servant leadership.
Yeah. So whenever I think about servant leadership, I think about Jesus. I mean, that's probably the ultimate example for me. But I would also say that if you think about, Christ's leadership, there was also a transformational aspect to that. So certainly he absolutely was a servant leader, but in the end, he was really much a transformational leader.
I like that.
So if I think transformative leadership is really what the ultimate goal is, because you want to leave something better than when you came.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good answer.
Is that a good answer?
Yeah, that's an excellent answer. I'm really pondering that because, as you're well aware of, we've been in some meetings together, and I surprise people maybe by saying, like, my whole job here is to get my kids to heaven, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
I guess mixing kind of that, in essence, we're all trying to help each other.
Right.
I guess I would assume
exactly
by that answer.
Exactly.
But what a role model to follow. I cannot get near his ability of patience and kindness. I guess.
And when I would kind of contrast the two, and not that they're necessarily contrasting, but if you think about servant leadership taken to its not to its intended goal, but to maybe too far, would be that you come into an organization and you want necessarily to appease everyone, and that's not what servant leadership is about.
That's right.
And that's certainly not what transformational leadership is about. So part of that, the job of a leader is to cast vision, and then to winsomely bring people along on that path. So to convince people. So when I came in, it was a matter of convincing the team at Houck that, hey, we could actually do this. And then once they could see a little bit of success and they got a little bit of a taste for it, then they were off to the races. So
I like that.
Yeah.
And do you consider kind of leadership and management different? And if so, how are they defined differently?
Yeah, completely different. I guess I would look at management more through an operational lens, and I am absolutely not operationally focused at Houck. And I would tell you this too. One of Gary Houck's concerns about when I came into the business was I had no construction experience.
Okay.
Lots of manufacturing experience, no construction experience, and I truly didn't know if I was going to be successful or not. But I thought I knew how to lead teams, and I thought it would probably translate. But because of that, I was not the subject matter expert. So nobody would come to me and say, "Hey, Lynn, how do you do this on a roof?" I had no idea how to do that on a roof, and I'm the last guy you probably want to ask. But it allowed me to focus on the business and not be in the business.
I like that.
And that's what trying to get my executive team, up to the point where they're not focusing in the business; they're on the business. And it's a different style, and it's a different routine, and it's a different kind of thought pattern.
Right.
Really.
Yeah, we hear a lot that we have people that find that maybe they've been in an organization for quite a few years, and that they feel, well, because I've had tenure, I should be a leader or a manager.
Right.
Have you ever seen that in an organization, and how has that ever played out? As a leader for yourself, right? We talk about like people, and we care for people. But how do you navigate that?
That's tough. I mean, and I've definitely screwed that one up plenty of times. I have promoted people, when they were absolutely not prepared for the role. And I feel terribly about that, because honestly, it was not setting them up for success. Even though it seemed at the time like the nice thing to do. Right. Hey, you're getting this promotion. Well, no, we're putting them in a spot where they are not going to be successful. And because I kind of wanted it to happen and thought they probably deserved it, I've definitely had some mistakes along the road there. Yeah, and it still is something that I would say sometimes I don't use my better judgment in some of those situations.
And I think I wonder, we all say that everybody leads, right? So like you don't have to be a leader of authority per se, but you can still lead people.
Yeah.
Would you agree to that statement? Because it seems like in the world that you oversee if you're working on a roof, you own that aspect, and you're leading potentially as a team leader or something like that.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And I always like to say that what I'm on the lookout for is I want to see people who lead without having the position. That's the person you want. So you want the person who you can see is leading but doesn't have the positional authority to mandate it. But people come alongside him because he or she has that gift. And
expand on that a little bit. For those that maybe are thinking, man, I don't necessarily know what it means to lead. I'm early in my career. Like, what is the actions to take to get to kind of that result that you're talking about? Because many would be like, well, I don't want to like overshadow my boss, or I don't want to like necessarily ask for something because maybe I'm not ready. Maybe it's a confidence issue. Like, do you have any advice for them on that?
So I guess the thing that I would say is that if you can understand your boss's vision and drive and direction and help them accomplish the goal, then they're going to be they're going to be your biggest fan.
I love
and
that.
you're not necessarily going to be competing for anybody's attention or anything, because and your boss is going to be thrilled because you're helping them get there.
Yeah.
Helping them get there.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a big piece of it. I think also that ability to step into a situation where you can understand what at ITW, what was the end goal? Increase shareholder value. Well, how do I boil that down to something that's practical in my day to day that says, well, I see an issue over there in the corner. If we fix that, we'd be at 1% more.
What's this increased shareholder value? That's a big one to explain, right? If
Yeah.
you don't know what it is.
Yes. Publicly held companies, that's all we existed for,
Yeah.
right? If we didn't drive shareholder value.
Is what I'm hearing from you is kind of you have to have a simplified, concise message that everybody rallies around.
Yes.
And what is that at Houck? I mean, you're a large organization, right? That have many different divisions and you continue to acquire, I understand, other businesses. How do you instill that vision? I mean, that's a lot of change all the time, right?
It is.
Exciting change.
It's exciting, but it's still work. And I always like to say, and I kind of joke at myself, it's easy for those who don't have to do it, right? So
you have a good team.
Yeah, I have an awesome team. They're amazing, and I have great owners who are very supportive of our growth. But that's a great question. I would say that there was probably at one point in my trajectory there at Houck, it was, hey, we're going to grow this company and then eventually sell it. But that's not been the case now that Kara's come on board as third-generation owner. So it's going to stay family-held, which is awesome, and I think best for the employees there. So now the question is, okay, what are we doing this for? Are we here to make more money? Of course. But ultimately, what are we doing this for? One of those things is we want to create opportunities for a young workforce that wants to grow with us. So we know that if we don't create opportunities for our young up-and-comers, they're not going to be around for long. So it
gets back to that people again.
It does get back to people. It does, and we acquire a lot of great people too. So very fortunate that way.
And when you do these acquisitions and you talk a lot about the people aspect, I mean, is that part of the due diligence? Like will you maybe not purchase a company because they don't fit with the core values?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, it's much easier to fix financial problems than it is to fix core value issues.
Okay.
So we typically try to target owners who are ready to transition but are deeply concerned about their team and their folks who have helped them get to where they're at.
Okay.
Because those owners are going to be more concerned about making sure that their folks have a good place to land than they are about necessarily other financial aspects of the sale process. So, what that means is that we inherit well cared for people, and well cared for people are typically good culture fits.
That's amazing. That's a good statement.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're really, really great at developing other leaders, though. Instinctively,
I hope so.
Right? Because you have this great team that didn't magically just show up.
Right.
Right? How do you develop? Developing a person is one thing, but how do you develop another leader?
No, that's a great question. And I would say this too. I was blessed at Houck that although we had come off some rather difficult financial times, when I got there, we had great folks in place. So it wasn't a situation where we had to go in and kind of clean house and anything like that. It was, we had great people who just needed some vision and maybe some motivation and the ability to succeed and see that they could succeed again. So kind of infusing that sense of optimism,
I see,
again, was a big part of it. And I think that's still the case. We always we're open book, so people see everybody sees our numbers, so they can see when we're winning and when we're losing.
And if you kind of go back to that, we talked a lot about the people, right? How do you, as the leader, manage keeping and developing and coaching a great team, but then also managing to the financials, right? I mean, how do you balance that?
It's a great question. I would say that if it's a tie, the people aspect typically wins. If it's a tie, but we have to have both. So I think one of the things that we think about a lot is, hey, times are good right now. What happens when times are not good? How are we going to lead through difficult times? How are we going to lead, say, through a recession? I had to lead through the Great Recession, and it was probably one of the most challenging times in my life from a work standpoint. There was not a lot of optimism, and you could not cut people fast enough,
to be able to balance the
P&L.
Wow.
And corporate was, well, that's fine. So your revenue's down. Let's cut heads until you get your income number.
Oh wow.
Right. So
that creates a lot of morale.
It does.
I assume,
Yeah.
That's how it was in corporate America. I
Yeah.
was in Fortune 100 companies for a period of time, and everything was about investor shareholder value.
Shareholder value.
So we would take like 300 employee offices, terminate them, and hire them as contractors so that it would come off as employees. But we spent more money.
You spent more money, right?
We spent
Exactly.
more money to do that. I
Yeah.
could never figure that out, but I'm not a mathematician, but
Right.
that never made sense, right?
Right.
Nobody changed desks.
Yeah.
They just changed how they got paid.
They became 1099s
You know,
or whatever.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that always intrigued me, but that's a
Wow.
whole different world, I guess, of how to balance.
That
the
was
share
very
of value.
typical in our world too, corporately.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
very typical. I think it's a strategy. At least they can go to the street and say we've trimmed heads by whatever. And yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you, I learned so many lessons in corporate. But I'm so blessed to be in a family-held situation now, and blessed to be partners with the Hauk family. It's been quite a way, I would say, to kind of end my career. So.
And like, if you talk about kind of your career path, many people think that they have this vision that they're going to play out. It's going to be perfect, right? I went to school for this, I got this job, and now I'm doing, it sounds like you've had a very windy kind of path, which has come into great success. But what are maybe the top 3 things that contributed to kind of keeping you focused?
So I think attitude. Attitude is big. Optimism was big, and a drive to succeed. I think part of the fact that I didn't have education made me work that much harder. So when I was in positions at corporate, I was in many times had MBAs that reported up to me, and so I had to learn fast. I had to learn on my feet, and I had to be, not look like the country hick. And that was a struggle sometimes. Yeah.
How would you say, from the aspects of like being an influential leader, how do you teach those skills to the other leaders that you have now? Like, we talk about a lot of reading, and like it seems very inherent to you, right? Like, it seems like we say in our world, like, you get it and you want it and you have the capacity to do it. But
Right.
how do you identify that in other people, right? You mentioned earlier when we started, like, they saw something in you and they developed you. How have you built that skill, or how could you share that, with the audience? I was talking to a young lady yesterday, and she's like, but I feel these things, but I don't understand, like, you tell me that I have these skills and abilities and you see something in me, but like, I don't see it in myself. And so, I'm sure you've been in that situation, but how do you lead through that?
That's a great question. We are fortunate, and this is not a pitch for North Group, but we do use them a lot for coaching. So to have coaches that work with my leadership team that I don't want to say commiserate with, but certainly run things by them, and they sometimes catch things within the organization that I wouldn't have caught. That's been really, really helpful. Part of it, too, is I think something I need to work at personally is that very thing you talked about, when you see something in someone, being very intentional about sharing it with someone. And sometimes I'm not intentional enough about making sure people know, hey, I see this in you. You have potential. I think I had the luxury of having that spoken into my life a lot. So I think I feel the need to do that too, and I need to do it more.
I think it's a balance of, like, we all think it, but we're still driving forward.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things.
I told you I loved you 30 years ago.
Right.
I changed my mind. I'll let you know. Right.
I heard that. One of my wife's family just said, well, it was just assumed. I mean,
Right,
we
just
didn't have to
assumed.
tell each other we
Right,
loved each other.
right.
And I'm like, yeah, but it's nice to hear it.
It's nice to hear. Exactly.
What strategies do you use to ensure kind of a alignment of, you're in a unique situation where you have shareholders, but it's a family business. You have a board, you have your employees, and then, kind of the constituents or other owners. How do you balance that? I mean, you're kind of like right in the middle of all of that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's quite difficult. And how do you balance, or where are the primary priorities there?
So I've always been fortunate in almost every position I've been in to have really, really strong financial people next to me. And if I don't, I would be a failure. So my CFO is wonderful. That's been a huge boon to us over the past 5 years. And also, I mentioned my team has been, I would say, half the team's acquired and half the team has been there for a long time. So we have that kind of nice mix of that. But EOS is probably the thing that really helps us kind of keep the glue together, or keep things glued together. I think that's probably one of the best tools that I know you use it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's been a big help for me when you have these multiple divisions that are kind of spread out all over the place.
It creates that clarity.
It creates clarity.
Yeah.
It really does.
Where
and
you're talking about that vision.
It's
right?
simplistic. And I think one of the things that I kind of struggle with is, hey, at what point do you kind of outgrow EOS? Because EOS does talk about that.
That's right.
At what point do you outgrow that, and then what do you do after that?
That's right.
Yeah,
I think I had the CEO of EOS on this podcast.
Did you really?
And he's a friend of ours. He was our first implementer.
No kidding.
Yeah,
That's
he
awesome.
was an implementer and then became the CEO.
Okay.
And we talk about that a lot. And he's like, listen, it can scale to 200, 300 employees. And then from there, each division then starts to run it as their own entity.
Okay.
So, like, in essence, like, your division creates their own 1, 3, and 5 year plan.
Gotcha.
And now you kind of break it out by individual, which I thought was pretty intriguing.
That is intriguing. Yeah.
And that they start to then be able to develop those key components on their own.
Right.
And then it goes all the way up to the main entity.
So we're rapidly getting to that point. So
that would be an amazing case study to check out from an EOS perspective.
It would.
Yeah.
I agree.
And we're all talking about EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System, which kind of brings clarity, kind of the 1, 3 year, and 5 year kind of picture. And I think you talked a lot about that vision, which probably comes from that you said simplicity. It makes it easy for everyone to understand.
It's not difficult. It's not. It's a very clear, simple,
and
concise
metric driven.
And metric driven.
Right. Like, are you on track or off track?
Yep.
Yeah. It's hard. I found if we kind of segue into ownership, right? Like, you have a sense of pride and ownership. And I found many times it's really difficult to get people to understand what is ownership. Right. And I think I'd love to get your feedback on that. I think I've kind of boiled it down to a conversation of, do you rent or do you own your house? Right. And how do I simplify that message of ownership? And one person said, I rent. I go, so when there's a problem, what does that mean? And they go, well, I call someone and they fix it. And I said, well, if you own it, what happens? They go, well, I call someone and I own the fix. And I go, all right, so let's work through that. As you have different owners in your business, how do you get them to understand what ownership looks like? I mean, to everyone that looks different, right? Some are like, well, I don't have the ability to make change, but I own this individual item. It sounds like many of the people in your organization have a high sense of pride of ownership.
Yeah, I think so. The other thing too that I was very fortunate to inherit at Hauk was there was a lot of a loyalty that was focused on the Hauk family for Gary and Kara. So that was a blessing because we had folks who stuck around because of that legacy. And that's been really good. We talk a lot about how do we make sure that stays intact and how do we continue to grow that. People seem to align with the Hauk family well, and that's really good. So having that presence in the business, and yet still being able to run the business on our own. The Hauk family's been very good about giving me lots of leeway to kind of grow this business, and I would say it really wasn't necessarily their strategy or thoughts to grow this business like we did, but they're, of course, obviously happy with the results, but they gave me a lot of flexibility. So
and with that growth, like what would you say the top 3 challenges are?
The top 3 challenges, as I see us going forward, are probably going to be how we stay cohesive from a leadership team standpoint. We still, this is probably getting too far into the weeds, but we still bonus everyone on corporate results.
Oh, I see. Okay.
On the leadership team.
Okay.
So it's, there's that piece, and you have to. It's a little socialistic, I like to say, but which I don't like. But I think that piece does keep us all focused on the group results. So one thing I've always said there was that it would bother me to have a situation where one division does outstandingly well. Now, if one division does outstandingly well year after year after year after year after year, and other divisions don't, that's something you have to address. But that's typically not what happens in our business. In our business, it's one year this guy's up and this person's down, and there's enough of that back and forth that everybody understands what it's like to sit in the leader's seat, and what it's like to sit in the loser bracket. So
and talk about core values of your organization.
Yeah,
because it sounds like that instinctively sounds like me that there's a level of core values there that allow that to happen. Because I mean,
think so.
we're independently probably very, people are driven and they want to succeed, but to have kind of lose that ego mentality and look for the greater good. What do the core values look like at Al?
Yeah, so they started out years ago as honor, humility, and humor.
Okay.
And if you know Gary Houck, you understand the humor aspect of
Okay.
it. And certainly humor still plays a big part in our world. It's a pretty much a happy place. When Gary shows up, it's like you want to go get the grandkids because it's going to be a fun time. But we've since Kara came on board, we changed it to honor, humility, and health. And the health aspect really was something that I think Kara brought to the table. Was, hey, we want to really focus and make sure that our folks, they stay physically healthy, they stay mentally healthy. The honor and humility piece are just how that really typifies the Houck family. So honor is, hey, when it comes to a situation with a customer that we don't think they're right, but they think they're right, we're probably going to allow them to be right. When it comes to a situation with an employee that we may think, hey, this is probably needs to be addressed, we may push it a little further down the road than most companies might. So that's that whole honor piece. We act with honor. We want to handle our be wise stewards of our financial resources. And the humility piece is just understanding that, look, at the end of the day, God honors hard work, but he never guarantees results. So there's a certain amount of this aspect that's out of our control. We're going to work hard, but we have to always understand that it's just because you had a phenomenal year does not necessarily mean you're an awesome businessman. There can be a lot of things that play into that. So maybe take credit for a very little bit of it. So.
Do you think that you can teach those core values, or do you think they're instinctive in people?
I think that in some ways they might be instinctive, but I mean, I'd love to think that we could teach them. I mean, we've certainly had examples of folks we've had in the business who haven't lived by those values, and we've tried to address that as quickly as we can, because it can be really toxic if they don't.
Right. Do you feel that they find their way out of the organization because of how strong those values are?
I would like to think so, but it doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes it takes a while, and I think if you would question all the folks at Houck, they would probably say, well, there's still some areas that need to be improved there. I think that's probably fair
for any organization. Yeah, right.
But I would like to think that our values would get beyond that. But so it's not perfect, as it's never perfect.
Right. Let's talk about your serving. You use the word serving in it, and what I'm impressed with you is how you know the community so well. And how talk about kind of what you believe giving back is about, right? I think we said in our intro, like there's been a significant amount of organizations that you've served that even on a volunteer or board base, what drives you on that? Like what's the real, and I know you're a humble guy, so but give us a little detail on that.
So I do appreciate that. And I would say this: when I was in my corporate life, I didn't really have an opportunity to do hardly any of that because I was traveling pretty much almost every week. So the minute I stopped doing that, my buddy at our Calico school said, "Hey, come on, you got to serve on the school board." So had the chance to do that, and it's been a great experience, a great school district, and that's been a lot of fun. And then had a chance to serve on the outer board at LCBC. That was an amazing experience. I would say that on all these experiences, I find that I take way more than I give. But that was an experience I felt that helped me spiritually. It certainly had me around folks who I would consider greater than me in terms of their own spiritual growth. So that was really good. So a couple other Lancaster Youth at the Mission is another organization we're pretty passionate about in Bibles to School, which is a release time program.
That's a good program. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm fortunate to have the bandwidth to do that kind of stuff now, which I didn't have the bandwidth before. So part of it is that giving back piece that I think is so important. It's it's funny. I was just telling a friend of mine this morning. I think sometimes it's easier for me to write a check than it is to actually give time. Time is precious, right? And so sometimes I'm pretty dismissive of any time requests, but I'm not so much with financially requests. So I know God requires both, right? So,
right. Yeah. I think I was talking to somebody about that yesterday, and I think we all came to the conclusion that it's a season of our lives that certain times we have time to give. and other times we have financially to give.
Yeah.
And in our organization, for years we've been doing, we have this program called VTO, which is called Volunteer Time Off.
I love that.
And we pay them 8 hours a year to go out and volunteer. And they can do anything that they want that fits them. But each year we round it up with the Extra Give that's local here.
Yeah.
And I'm always fascinated to see, regardless of how young or how seasoned the person is in their career, how everyone has a passion to give in some manner. And those that don't have the financial gift volunteer that day.
Right.
And it just blows my mind on how good people are.
Yeah.
If given the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think many times they don't know how to get involved, or they're afraid or whatnot. I know in my beginning of my career of kind of giving back, it felt intimidating.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Or maybe it wasn't organized enough to know how to get involved.
Right.
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 But I guess that gets a lot into the serving and kind of how we talked about faith, right, and belief. And tell us a little bit about how. We started about your family as well, right? So, tell us about your family and your kids and your life, based around how do you lead them?
Thank you. Well, actually, my wife tells me how to lead them.
So. Smart man.
No, I was privileged to, I would, and anybody who knows Patty knows that I married up. I definitely married up. I was very fortunate. We'll be married. We just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
So, yeah. So very blessed. And we've had a wonderful life together. So it's been quite an adventure. Three daughters. Two of the older daughters married. And then Kate and Matt, our oldest daughter and son-in-law, have their 3 grandkids.
Wow.
So the 2 married kids live within about a half an hour of our home, so close enough. Patty gets plenty of grandmother time, which is awesome, and I get plenty of pop time. So.
And you look like you're like 45.
So well, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not, definitely not. I'm a little long in the tooth. But and then our youngest daughter, Tiana, our middle daughter Mackenzie works for Schreiber Pediatric as an occupational therapist. My older daughter Kate's a physical therapist, and her husband Ben works in one of our companies as a project manager, and Kate's husband Matt works as a physician's assistant in interventional radiology.
Wow, they're all
medical.
They're all into how they can help other people.
Yeah.
Wonder where they got that from.
Probably mom. Probably mom. Yeah. And then my youngest daughter Tiana, we adopted from China in 2005.
Wow.
She is now 20 years old, and she's a sophomore at Liberty University in their RN program.
Wow.
So BSN. Yeah.
Wow. What a wonderful family there.
Yeah, we're so blessed. And then I have 6 siblings, most of them kind of in the area here. So it's a big family. On the Sensenig side, there's probably, I don't know, I've kind of lost count, 40 or 45 grandkids.
Wow.
And then on the Shope and Patty's side, we just had Thanksgiving at our house. We probably had 30 or 35 folks there at the house. So lots of family. We're fortunate to pretty much all get along. I should say we all get along great. So we've been very blessed to have, and everybody kind of somewhat close.
Wow, what a journey that's a lot. That teaches you to have patience. That teaches you to share.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's been really interesting. We talk about leading and leading people, and you find a lot of the times, like, are you a single child? Are you from a bigger group? And somebody told me one time, they go, hey, when I came from a bigger family, we were forced to share.
We had to play in a sandbox, right?
And it changed how we interact in the business world today. So I never really connected that, but that makes a lot of sense on even your communication, right? Like you're coming from more of a holistic, bigger picture type of thing.
Right.
As we kind of look at like serving in general, right? Like, what piece of advice could you give your younger self? Like, now that you've gone through this journey, you've been quite successful in it. You've said you've had the ups and downs. But with all the knowledge that you have today, what would you tell your younger self if you're getting started again?
Yeah, I think I would, and God's blessed me to be able to think differently, but I think I would always encourage myself to think out of an attitude of abundance, not one of scarcity.
Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, so where I probably would have been in my younger self would have been more focused on making sure that I had, enough money saved for retirement and really focused on those financial goals and looked at it more from a scarcity mindset more than an abundance, and saying at the end, if I would have known back then what I know now, I would have said I probably could have been more generous along the way. I could have.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that's been something in the past few years that God has really impressed upon me is, this is his resources are limitless, right? Mm-hmm. But we tend to think in very finite terms.
Right. We think kind of inwardly.
Exactly.
I was reading a passage the other day that basically just said, put your trust in me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in yourself.
Oh,
and I was like, wow. And if you believe in me,
yep,
then all will be fine. And
absolutely.
I was like, oh man, that is a humility in itself to be able to let go.
It is.
Right?
It is.
But it seems as if you've learned, though, how to adapt and change to that. I guess we all do,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It is scarcity mindset because we have nothing,
right,
probably when we start off.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from your mindset now, how do you apply that with your children?
That's a great question. I know something, you and I share a Vistage group together, and I've truly value those relationships. And one exercise that we did not too long ago was the green box exercise. Yes. It had such an impact on me personally.
Okay.
It's basically, where's the box where if you fall over tomorrow dead, that your family can go to and find everything they need. And as I was thinking about that and thinking about how do we enjoy what God has blessed us with our kids in this time of life, versus saying, you got to wait until the end to, giving with warm hands versus cold hands, or cold hands versus warm hands, those kind of things are all things that Patty and I have been looking at a lot lately and saying, what's the, praying about, what's the best and why and wisest and highest use of resources.
Right, and time.
Time.
That exercise was, for those that were kind of don't know what it is, it was kind of like, how do you prepare your family for your passing, right?
It was pretty tearful,
as
I recall. It was emotional.
Right?
Yeah.
And the most impact is that we had to write letters to our children.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was a dry eye in the room.
There was not.
But it was taking the time to slow down and just think about that had a lot of impact on, I think, many of us. Yeah. That really, like, what are we doing this all for?
Right.
Like, what are these worldly things? Are they really that important?
Exactly.
And I guess at some level it's maybe a purpose. But I find many times it sounds like you really have found your purpose and like meaning, which is really inquisitive to me, because every day I kind of wake up and say, am I doing what you want me to do? Right? Am I serving you in the way that you put me here? Right? Like, you've put each of us here for a reason,
right? And
we're here to do that. But like, seems really hard to figure that out all the time.
It does,
right?
It does,
like,
I agree.
Are we doing what is meant to be? And
right.
I heard myself yesterday give advice to somebody that I probably should take myself, and said that, in my mind, I'm here to serve others and to help others. So relevant how that is, right? Having this conversation today, if it helps someone else, or that we can share what we know to help someone else, is really impactful. And everything gets benchmarked on that. And I really realized recently, like, man, you've really strayed away from, like, have you concentrated more on the scarcity issue, right, in business, than concentrating on those who you're serving.
Right.
And my advice to the person was, find what your why is first, and then baseline the rest of your decisions off of that.
I like
and
that.
You really just reminded me of that, and it just is it seems like you're very centered on that.
Well,
potentially.
I'd like to think so. I'm not really sure that I am all the time. It was interesting that my coach at North Group this morning. Yes. So this is a nugget. You don't have to pay for this one, but this is a nugget. It was he said, Lynn, he said, I've been asking this question of a lot of folks lately. What do you know to be a truth in your business or in your life that you are acting as if it's an untruth?
Ooh.
That was really.
Well, that's deep.
That
How'd
is
you
deep.
answer that?
It took me a. Well, I came up with an answer. I came up with some answers, but I really need to think more about it, because I think that we all do that to some degree. I know I certainly do. But what do I know to be truth, but I'm acting like it's an untruth, and I'm choosing to maybe not do anything about it, not change anything about it. And his was
And did
really.
he mean personally, for you personally, or organization?
He was focused on the organization, but he also said that for him, like one of the things that he struggled with was that he knows, for instance, that there is poverty all around him, and so does that really change how he lives his life? Does it change how what he does every day? Does it change? That's just a for instance of, we probably know that we've got a problem within our business, and we know that it's a problem, but we're not going to.
When times are good, we kind of ignore that.
Times
don't ignore that. But
good times can be a problem. Really facilitate.
Right.
That. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know that from experience.
Yeah.
Right? Screwing that up a couple times.
Yeah.
You think you put your energy somewhere else. But that is a really interesting. I'm sitting here contemplating that, and I'd almost have to sit and stew on that a little bit.
I still need to stew on it.
Wow.
Because and conversely, what you were saying about good times, we have kind of a saying at Halkett's that, and it's not, I forget who said it originally, but in times of peace, prepare for war. Like, what are we doing now to make sure that we are prepared and kind of future proofing
for what's going to happen,
for what could happen, and hopefully it doesn't.
Right.
But if it does, then you
right.
at least have a plan together.
Huh. And you one thing that we kind of subtly went over, which was a lesson that I learned the hard way, is you said that, hey, you have a mentor or a coach.
Yeah.
For those that are trying to get into or improve themselves, talk about what you deem, like, what is that coach to you? What is that mentor? Why do you have it? Some would be like, listen, he runs a successful organization. Why does he need a coach? Right, or a mentor. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I think you said earlier too, you had a lot of good mentors you went through.
I did. I think blind spots is probably the biggest thing, and especially the fact, like, again, going back to the consulting side of it from a North Group knows our business inside it, so they know where all the bodies are buried. Like it's hard to keep secrets, from those guys, because they'll call you out on it. Lynn, I know that's not true. So I think that's where, and I think too, the other thing that coaches have helped in my life so much. I mean, our Vista Chair is my coach too, Jim Schultz. He does a great job with it. I do think that they have really focused me on personal development, and personal development is probably not something I would have focused enough on in the past. So I think it's been excellent. It's many times just a really, really good time to not commiserate, but kind of toss ideas back and forth. And as you plan, I am very much like I'm thinking about, what does the next 5 years look like? What does the next 10 years look like? And as I prepare for exiting at some point, like, what does that look like, and how am I thinking about that? How will I be thinking? Could I potentially be thinking at that point that I'm not thinking now? I think Roger North always says, begin with the end in mind. What's the end look like? And try to plan towards that end. I think about our trajectory at Halk, and if you think about the last, say, 9 years that I've been there, we would have never thought we would be in a position we're in now 8 years ago.
Right.
But if you plan, in my head, I thought we could be there, but it was not, and it was anybody else's radar.
And you think like kind of the coach has that third party view of kind of calling you out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in a polite, courteous way.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that hearing you say that earlier in my career, I was kind of like always taught, like, solve your own problems. Right. And I was like, wow, if I reflect back many, many, many years, to have that mentor then would have made a shortcut at a lot of things that had been there, done it, right?
That's true.
And I have a mentor now that says, hey, you're going to grow out of me someday. And so
that's a smart
always
mentor.
Be looking out of that. And every time we end a session, he says, am I worth talking to next time? And I was like, well, why do you say that? And he goes, because there's going to become a time that I may not be the person to talk to.
That's a very smart mentor.
And I was like, wow, okay, but they don't hold back. They're like, I appreciate you saying that. However, are you thinking about X, Y, and Z?
Right.
And they bring a different thought pattern. They're not solving problems per se, but they put, just like how you receive. So I encourage everyone that, as you move in life, to have that mentor. Have somebody to talk to. I think there's a culture of, like, don't give it up.
I agree.
You got to be stoic and strong.
Yeah.
And I think the most successful people have someone that they can talk to.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. No question about it.
Wow. So as we kind of wrap up a little bit today, as a leader, it sounds like you're constantly learning. I love to learn things from you as we have conversations, right? And so, like, could you share like areas that you go for learning or resources? A lot of the people that we talk to are like, well, I don't have time to learn. And I'm like, well, you're learning every day, right? So, like, where do you find your education or learning or even books or reading?
Yeah, great question. I love Lencioni. I love his stuff. So I found a lot of resources there. I think too, the other thing I would just from an encouragement standpoint, if someone who says they don't have time for learning is not they don't have their priorities in order. So
that's a good statement.
I think it's really important that you have to make time, because if you don't work on that piece, you're never going to get out of the day-to-day grind, and you'll be doing the same thing 20 years from now. So
that's a valid statement. So it says you're kind of saying, like, if you don't work on yourself, you'll never be able to lead anybody else.
You won't.
Right.
You won't.
Yeah, and that is really interesting, because those that work on themselves seem to then grow in their careers or grow in their path. And everybody has a path. They don't necessarily need to be a leader.
Right.
But in some mind, there might be inspiring other people too.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. So to talk about your favorite book or concept with Lencioni.
I would say probably the favorite concept with Lencioni is the book, and you'll refresh my memory here, but the one that talks about the fable that talked about the get it one, hungry, humble, and smart.
Oh,
hungry,
five
humble, and smart.
dysfunctions of a team.
Yes, 5 dysfunctions of a team.
I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And years ago, we had our team all read through that, and we tried to use that as our hiring lens.
Ah, yes. Because he has a descriptive format for that.
He does.
Yes.
He does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah, I love that. And has that been successful for you as far as from a hiring perspective?
I think so.
Yeah.
We're never perfect, but yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have some wonderful people within Houck, and I just feel an obligation to provide opportunities for them to continue to grow in their professional careers.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Building the next generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's past me now. So. Yeah.
So as we kind of close for today, what's your closing comments, feedback to anybody that's listening?
Oh man, anybody that's listening, first of all, I would say thank you for this opportunity. This was an awful lot of fun.
It was a good time.
I always love our conversations. They always seem to kind of organically flow. So I'm very fortunate with that. I would say, you know what? Stay humble, stay driven, and keep a positive attitude. If you can't have a positive attitude, you probably need to go find a spot where you can have a positive attitude, or change yourself. But you're gonna have to have that get up out of bed in the morning, want to go to work kind of a thing. It's important for that to drive you, and if it's not driving you, then you probably need to change something in your career.
Like find something else.
Find something else.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's well said.
Yeah.
Whew. So Lynn, from hardware stores to boardrooms, Lynn Sensenig has grown to be such a leader. It's not about titles for him, as you can see. It's about serving others and driving real impact. His insights remind us that great leaders don't just build businesses, they build people and communities. A big thank you to you, Lynn, and your incredible journey. And, thank you for tuning in to the Servant Leadership Library. Until next time, remember, leadership is less about the corner office and more about the people you empower along the way. Till next time.